Hello everyone, welcome to episode 1 of A Dash of Chaos. This episode is going to be about Zack Snyder's new film, Army of the Dead, which is now out on Netflix. It actually came out in select theaters on May 14th, so about a week before its Netflix release date, which was on Friday, May 21st. I am a huge fan of Zack Snyder, his films, the way he runs his sets. It always seems like everyone he works with is so extremely grateful for the experience and just loves everything that he does and his work and how he interacts with his cast and crew. So for me, obviously, this year there were two Zack Snyder films out. There was Zack Snyder's Justice League earlier in March, and now we have Army of the Dead. And what's even more exciting about this particular film is the fact that it is going to be an original script by him, and it's the first original script, like the first movie that he's written since Sucker Punch. And Sucker Punch is... Okay, I kind of got into a little bit of slack for this, but I've always said that Sucker Punch is my favorite Zack Snyder film, but to clarify, Man of Steel is my favorite Zack Snyder film. But I always feel like Man of Steel is undisputed Zack's best film, so I always just rank everything else. I'm always like Man of Steel first, and then Sucker Punch. So Sucker Punch was on the actual list, technically my second favorite Zack Snyder film, and after watching Army of the Dead, I do have to say that Army has knocked that off. So it would go Man of Steel, Army of the Dead, Sucker Punch for my top three. And I'll get into why and everything about that. So with Army of the Dead, obviously this episode will include spoilers, but I will try to keep it as general as possible. But here's the big spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning. I will talk about certain things in detail. But if you haven't seen it already, turn this episode off now. Go watch it if you are interested. But if you aren't, that's totally understandable. It is a zombie movie, which I know that genre is not for everyone, and I will actually get into that because there are some limitations with this genre that, even though I love Zack and I know he's done some amazing and interesting things with this movie, there's still certain rules and certain tropes that are kind of crappy, I'll be honest, with when it comes to zombie movies or even horror in general. But we'll get into that a little bit later. So, actually, before I get into it, I'm going to talk about the first 15 minutes of the film, which also includes the opening credits. And actually, that was released on May 13th. So we got to see quite a bit of it a little bit early. The movie's about 2.5 hours, and if you decided to watch the video on YouTube, or some of you may have decided to be spoiler free, the first 15 minutes was released onto the internet, and I watched that, and it really kind of set the tone. I kind of had an idea of, I had my expectations. It's Zack, so I knew it wasn't just going to be, zombie movie with lots of gore and everything like that. Even though it will, of course, include that. But those 15 minutes really showed what exactly we might be dealing with, or just at least give us a hint. There was a lot of commentary on the incompetence of the military, and there was a lot of finger pointing at white people in America, and I'm not surprised. That's how it went. There were mentions of Area 51, so even last week I was like, aliens? Possibly? And, considering I'm a huge X-Files fan, that was really cool. that could be a possibility of something. Um, and then, of course, there were the opening credits, which showed this montage of, characters and how they were essentially soldiers fighting off these zombies in Las Vegas. And what I was really confused about at the beginning, or not at the beginning, while watching the first 15 minutes, which is technically the beginning of the movie, was that there was this white suburban soccer mom character that has never showed up on any of the posters. As far as I know, wasn't a character. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this was a surprise for the rest of the movie. And I was very confused as to why she was actually being introduced and why she was being focused on. And then within the end of the credits, she dies. And it's not as simple as that, but basically it does kind of show, it's essentially a Karen. It's quote unquote Karen. It is, like I said, a suburban soccer mom, and she essentially gets too much power from killing these zombies. She starts killing people who she isn't sure that is infected. There's a gash on a man's arm and his girlfriend in a car, and it's actually very interesting because Vandero with his saw is trying to help them out of there, and then he gets distracted by the zombies. Not distracted, like the zombies come along and he has to kill them. And what he doesn't see is that, behind him, this soccer mom, sees the gash on the driver's arm, assumes that it's a bite, and then the two of them are like, no, 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 no. And then she just shoots them. And of course, what's super, super important is that they're two by POCs. And it's, a white woman killing them. And there's an interesting imagery there. And not only the imagery, but the music playing on top, which is amazing. It's Viva Las Vegas. I believe it's Richard Cheese and then Alison Crowe, who I didn't know was going to have any music in this film, and did Hallelujah for Zack Snyder's Justice League, and she was also in Man of Steel, so it was really cool that she did another song for this movie. But, sorry, I'm a little off track, but, when the song plays during that scene that I was just talking about, the lyrics are literally, if you see it once, you'll never be the same again. And then a kind of like cheeky little, I saw what you did there. So obviously what you're seeing on screen is on purpose. And the music solidifies that as well. So, like I said, it really kind of set the tone for what this movie was going to be about. Obviously, there was going to be a lot of commentary. There's going to be a lot of commentary, possibly on the government and just America as a whole. Did that make me more excited? Of course. It's what I expect from Zack, so none of his films are ever just kind of straightforward in that sense. If he says, I'm going to do a zombie movie, it's not just going to be about zombies. Or if he, when he made Batman v Superman, it wasn't really about Batman versus Superman, and I don't need to really go into all that, but basically with Zack, there's always more with his films, which I love, and that's why I'm such a huge fan of his. So, kind of moving on from that, the general idea of this movie is that, there's this character, Tanaka, who he approaches Dave Bautista's character, Scott, and basically sets up a mission for them. It's a heist, and it's to go into a vault to retrieve $200 million, and if he does, he'll get 15 million of it, which, that's an interesting number and a cut of it. What I thought was also interesting, and it's made clear in the dialogue, was that Tanaka's already been insured for this money, so he's already received it back, and he wants more. So that already stuck in my mind about being kind of odd. I'm like, okay. But then I was like, okay, well, the rich, if they want to stay rich, that's what they do. So yeah, so he approaches Dave Bautista's character Scott. Scott wrangles up a team. Um, it's mostly, people he's known back from the zombie killing days, and so they all go off. They try to go into Vegas, and then they, are going to have to crack the safe and try to get this money. So it's a zombie heist film, and that was the worst summary ever. But there are a lot of different characters in this film, and I was worried about having that many characters in a 2.5 hour film. 2.5 hours is a pretty good runtime, but when you have that many characters, you always wonder, who's going to be focused on more. And even when you look at the posters, there's this huge ensemble, and it's really just focused mostly on the five. So it was Scott, Cruz, Vanderoe, Dieter, and Kate. So those were the four that were mostly featured on the posters. Even though each character got individual character poster, those were kind of like the ensemble posters. That's what it looked like. So in my mind, I was already expecting to see mostly those five characters. And we do see those five characters, and they all have interesting stories. And that's kind of also something that was hard to swallow, is that a lot of these characters do have very interesting stories, but there's not enough time to focus on them, or you don't get enough of their backstory. But again, I expected that from an ensemble film. But that would probably be one of my first critiques, was I wish we could find out more. And I know there's going to be a prequel series and spin-offs as well. So maybe we will find out more in, the prequel movie, so Army of Thieves and Army of the Dead, the animated series. So I might have to bite my tongue about that later, but as of right now, and just, looking at Army of the Dead itself, that would be my first critique. However, I will get into my gripes and more of my dislikes later. I do want to just talk about the initial thoughts, and I already mentioned this before, but yes, it is my favorite film, well, my second favorite film by Zack Snyder. I was really kind of surprised that it surpassed Sucker Punch. I've loved Sucker Punch for years. I watched that movie 7 times in theaters within like 2 weeks. So I live, breathe, and I know the inside out that movie, and I could discuss it for hours. So it was kind of a high bar to set. I knew it wasn't going to be better than Man of Steel for me, but then I watched it right at 3 a.m. and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then I watched it again later that day. So I watched it basically twice in one day. And I have to say, the second watch is definitely better, because you do know what's going on in the entire film. So you can start looking at like little details that may have hinted at certain plot twists, or certain things that happen to the characters. And what I loved was how many doors it opened. Obviously, one of the biggest things was that the zombies were essentially a different species. It wasn't your typical, they're just infected and they're brainless and you just kill them. There was a hierarchy of zombies, which I know Zach talked about, but it was really cool to see it on screen. You had the Shamblers, who were kind of your typical zombies, I guess, that you normally see in movies and TV shows. Mostly, if you're not too familiar with the zombie genre, that would be the type of zombies you're kind of used to. And then you have these alphas who are a lot smarter, and they really live in a society together and have their leader Zeus. So that was super cool. And there's also the implication from the first 15 minutes, I was talking about the incompetence of the military, that it seems like these zombies, if you want to call them that, were the result of government experiments. You can tell that Zeus's character was some type of soldier or worked for the military. He does have dog tags, and he continuously wears those dog tags. So I don't think that was a mistake that the dog tags remained around his neck. I think it was, on purpose to show that the military had something to do with this. And then there was, mentioning Area 51, so possibly are they aliens? Did they test on aliens on humans? And then there were also robot zombies. So there's a lot of cool stuff. It was a lot less zombie movie than one would expect, but it's still very much a zombie movie. But there's definitely elements of sci-fi in there and fantasy and things like that. And one of the other things that I really, really enjoyed was Vandero and his journey and how he could possibly be the new Zombie King if there was a sequel. And Zack has said that he would be the new Zeus, essentially. I love this idea. Vandero was probably my favorite character. I'd say my 4 favorite characters were Vandero, Chambers, Dieter, and Valentine the tiger. All had such amazing scenes. And Vandero was, he's a philosophy major. So it would be super, and cool if he was kind of like the philosopher king in the sequel. And he really he was a standout because of a lot of his dialogue. And what he was saying had a lot of double meanings, or at least I interpreted it that way. I'll get back to him later because there's a lot to unpack with that character. And then I was mentioning Chambers. Chambers had one of the coolest fight sequences in the film. She killed a lot of zombies. I'd say it's probably one of the best kind of like solo action sequences that Zack has done. And Samantha Wynn really knocked it out of the park. She was awesome in it. And she was gone too soon, and I wish we could have known more about her character. It was kind of frustrating that, she was the first to die, but it's a zombie movie. Everyone is going to die, basically, and that's part of the frustration of this genre because, and I was discussing this actually, even when zombie movies, especially, or just horror in general, are trying to make points, majority of the time, most of the characters will die or be murdered, except for maybe one, but sometimes none of them survive. And it feels very punitive as a narrative, which is frustrating because then, when you talk about this group, basically it's like the first character that died is a woman, and I always hate that too in films where people are dying. Why does it have to be a woman? But it's the limitations of the genre, unfortunately. So, and again, I knew that everyone would die, so it was really, I was keeping an eye out on kind of who was dying, or rather how they were dying and when they were dying. So, yeah, I mean, I think there was none of the deaths were particularly a surprise in who dies, but it was interesting because about halfway through the movie I realized that their deaths were actually reflective of kind of who the characters were, what their motivations were, and I'll kind of go through that as well. But yeah, so Chambers had a really cool scene, and then Dieter I loved. He was just so funny. He got all of those screams, so he was essentially, if you want to say in the horror genre, he was the scream queen of the film, which was so funny. And I just loved all his little side comments and how he was basically, kind of the useless one when it came to killing zombies, but he was so important because he had to open the safe, so without him, the rest of the group really couldn't finish the mission, essentially. And then, of course, there was Valentine, who doesn't love a big cat, but it was really cool to have a zombie tiger. I thought there wasn't going to be that much Valentine. I figured it would just be kind of one scene, and, it was very much to be like, oh my gosh, they have a zombie tiger. But actually, Valentine showed up and had a really cool scene as well. And she like guards the area essentially. She scopes out the area, so that was really, really cool. But yeah, like other than these characters, just kind of getting into the themes and everything like that. This movie is very anti-America, and you can argue with me, but it was basically anti-government, anti-police, anti-white people, anti-capitalism, whatever people kind of define as America or what America is actually defined by. This movie was basically like anti that. And the fact that they were planning to nuke Vegas on July 4th, I pretty much rolled my eyes on that one too. Again, very on the nose for Zack. And also, the zombies are considered the others of this world. Obviously, they're seen as a threat, but there's a very interesting line near I'd say the first third of the film, because, normally the zombies are a threat, they're dangerous and everything, but there's an exchange between Lily, so what Lily says, she says about the zombies, you all keep talking about the city like it's their prison. It's not. It's their kingdom. So that already sets up this idea that all of these people in the ensemble coming into Vegas, they're stepping into someone else's territory. And Lily pretty much says that too, that they'll allow us to be in here as long as we play by their rules. So it's not about, the zombies are just roaming around everywhere like most zombie films are, where kind of like the entire country gets infected. They're very much in this one area and they live and thrive there. And then I think it's probably about like 10-15 minutes after that, there's another exchange between Cruz, Martin, and Scott, where Cruz says, it's a free country, people can look at whoever they want. Martin replies, actually, it's not a free country, we're not in America anymore, haven't you heard? And then Scott says, which technically makes it an even freer country, right? So, again, really, there's not a lot to kind of deny that this movie is a little bit anti-America, or a lot anti-America. And so that was so much fun to kind of see that right at the forefront. And for it to not really be hidden, although I wouldn't be surprised if it kind of went over a lot of people's heads, because, it's a zombie movie, and when people are bitten and eaten and killed, you kind of just blank out because you are aware that that is going to happen more often than not. And again, that is the limitations of this genre, that people will just see it as a zombie movie and not look any further. So there's kind of a lot of lines that I feel were put into the movie to make you actually think a little bit more. And they weren't as subtle as Zack normally is, and I think he recognized the limitations of the zombie genre as well, which is why some of these lines are in there for very obvious reasons. Whereas normally he uses a lot more of his visuals for that storytelling. He is such a visionary director. And that's also something I was kind of like, okay, like the script is a little bit more, I guess, holding your hand in that sense, but it didn't detract from it. But yeah, to continue on with that idea, the zombies are seen as the others or like outsiders, but the funny thing is both of these sides, so the team that's going into Vegas as well as the zombies, they're all outsiders. They are both used. You can see, Scott, Cruz, Van der Rohe, anyone who fought for the government at first to contain Vegas. They are used, they're forgotten, and they're betrayed by the government. Because, Scott doesn't have any money. Like, that's the whole point. Like, he's working in a burger joint even after doing all that he did. And he even says that to Cruz, like, don't we deserve something better, basically? Like, all those people we saved, like, we are doing this for other people, so can't we do something for ourselves? And there's no way you can blame them for that. And that was really important. That it's interesting that a lot of the characters had very selfish reasons for going on this mission, but you couldn't and shouldn't blame them for being that selfish, because it's they're just hired to essentially go on a suicide mission for money, even though a lot of them fought for the government, and then they're killed on this mission. And then in the end, they nuke Vegas regardless. So even if they weren't killed by the zombies while they're in Vegas, if they didn't get out of there in time, they were going to still be killed by the government anyway. So there's a lot of that. And in the end of it, there's actually only 2 characters that technically survive. And I say technically because Kate actually survives. She is alive. And then Vandero is bitten, or he realizes he's bitten, and he is going to be a zombie. So yes, he does survive, because the zombies are not the undead like everyone believed. They are a new species. So I love this idea that there are of succession. So Kate on the human side and Vandero on the zombie side. It's really unfortunate because, again, this is the whole thing that I was saying about zombie movies, is that it feels very punitive that all of these characters would die when they're in there for reasons that are surface level selfish, but they're not. So in that, however, to kind of comment on that, all of their deaths of everyone who goes in there, like I mentioned earlier, are reflective of the reasons they are there. So, for example, Cummings, who's this creep and this asshole and, assaults women who are in the quarantine camp. So much so Lily sacrifices himself, and he is immediately killed off first for all of the horrible things he's done. And Lily literally calls him the C word and calls him a rapist and sends him to the zombies as a sacrifice. Basically he gets what he deserves. And then Chambers, it's said that she's never killed a zombie before, but she is Guzman's ride or die. So her death is out of loyalty, to help her friend leave. And they had that moment where she's like, just go. But before that, she has all the epic zombie kills. So again, it's very reflective of kind of her introduction. I'm kind of forgetting the order right now, but what other characters are? Then you have, since we're talking about Chambers, then you have Guzman, who is the YouTube influencer. And when he's introduced, you see one of his YouTube videos, and he shows his zombie kills for hits, and he's all, he does the whole subscribe. So essentially he's monetizing killing zombies. And in his death, he is killed as money is raining down on him as the zombies converge on him. And also he actually gets to shoot one of the robot zombies, which is really cool because his whole career is the internet age and the digital age, and then he actually gets to face off with one of the technologically advanced zombies. So again, there's the mirroring there. Who else is there? There's Cruz. Cruz's death was probably, if you want to talk about surprising deaths, was surprising. And it was the it was the way she was killed, which was basically a zombie, grabbed her head and snapped her neck, which was really intense. And I actually thought that quite odd, and the reason why I thought that was odd was that was the only death that they showed that way, where it wasn't like a typical zombie death where, a bite or they maul or attack in a horde. And then I thought about the scene right before that is her admitting that she didn't come on this mission for the money, and she didn't care about any of that. She cared about Scott, and she was hoping, that there could still be a chance for something romantic between them. And that was really interesting too, because they showed Cruz's character as being successful. She runs her own business and everything like that. So for her, there was an emotional connection she was missing. And the dialogue is very descriptive. Like she says, like, I wasn't waiting, but if there was a chance, then I was going to take it. And so basically, she's not there for the money. She doesn't care about killing zombies anymore. So when she dies, literally moments after, she technically gets one of the quickest deaths. And I feel like that's that reflection of, she isn't there for the typical reasons, so she doesn't get the typical death either. And then Scott's is really obvious. He dies rather, protecting his daughter. And there's a really cool thing about Scott, where his character isn't really the leader, even though he was kind of shown to be, but throughout the entire movie, he doesn't necessarily make good decisions, or he doesn't really make decisions as a whole. He's actually more of a follower. So that's interesting, and because you're hiring your lead actor or your lead role, and he isn't actually much of a leader. Like, he doesn't have a lot of characteristics that I found interesting. Scott was probably one of the least interesting characters, and that was, I feel like that was just changing the expectation there, because usually in these movies, the person who kind of leads the group is definitely more charismatic, is kind of shown to be a true leader, and he really isn't. So there's really something interesting about his death, because not only, like, he gets bitten, and just in the moment that he's like already turning into one of those, like into one of the alphas, he gets killed immediately. And I felt that, like, again, was very reflective, saying that, like, no, he isn't an alpha type, he isn't a leader. And then paired with the fact that he was trying to save his daughter as well. Peters is there for the money, and literally has the line of, I'm the helicopter guy, and ends up being pinned into, like, dies in the helicopter, and is actually pinned into the helicopter seat. So that's very, right there. Martin is there for money and power, and he's been trying to manipulate and trick the group the entire time. So I love that right at the end, he gets tricked, and when he opens the bag, it's, a money counter, again, on the nose. So he's tricked by that. And then earlier in the movie, he said, oh, it's a goddamn zombie tiger that's crossing the line. And then, of course, the zombie tiger, Valentine, kills him, which I loved as well, because Valentine is described to be one of the Siegfried and Roy tigers from Vegas. So a show animal, a show tiger, basically that idea that, animals are taken from their natural environments and brought into corporate America for entertainment, essentially. Not corporate America, but capitalistic America. And it's interesting that something that's used for entertainment and to gain money, or earn money rather, ends up killing him. And then Lily's whole thing is that she brings people into Vegas, but she doesn't necessarily stay and wait for them, or help them to escape. She just, her role is to bring people in. And then the way she dies is that she actually stays to help people escape. And then with Gita, unfortunately, she dies in the helicopter crash at the end of when they're almost there, and she's almost, about to escape. And unfortunately, she had gone into Vegas just to try and get some money to help her and her kids escape from that quarantine camp. And so again, that death is reflective. It's really interesting because you don't actually really see her, like, you see her body out of focus, and I felt that that was very on purpose, because she's definitely representative of those kind of the innocents that die along the way, which you know, again, happens in these genres. So I feel like Zack felt he didn't need to show you that death in great detail. So you just kind of see her out of focus on the front of the helicopter. And then Dieter, he's there to open this safe, and he dies, you know, protecting Vandero, and while closing the safe. That's where he dies. Well, we don't see him die, so is he still alive? But for all intents and purposes, you know, of this podcast and commenting on the death, he is considered dead. So, but, and again, that's kind of like reflective of his purpose there. I think I got everyone. If I forgot someone, let me know, and I will tell you, not tell you, but I'll explain what that death was. But yeah, I kind of noticed that halfway through the movie that it was, sorry, that was like a really long description, but I did notice that these deaths were kind of specific to each character, and I thought that was really cool. Oh, Vandero. Vandero is... I can't believe I forgot. It's because I want to kind of go into Vandero. But Vandero, he's bitten, but he doesn't realize he's bitten until a lot later. He was in the safe and gets nuked, and when Vegas gets nuked, he survives that. And then later, he has the bite, and it's assumed to have come from Zeus because he had a face-off with him. And that was interesting to me that he was turned into one of the zombies, because there's a piece of dialogue at the beginning when Scott and Cruz are trying to recruit him that he talks about, you know, the first time around, I never thought of them as anything but the zombies, but this time around, I think about all of their faces and that everyone is just people. So I have this big theory with Vandero that Zeus actually chose Vandero to be his successor on purpose. And I think... like there was an interview with Omari that he was talking about, he believes Zeus and Vandero's characters really respected each other, and I definitely saw that too, because they were able to have that fist fight, essentially, you know, man versus man type fight, which again wasn't very typical. That's not how zombie movies really work in general, and usually zombies aren't as strong and capable as they are. So to basically just see like a face-off, like, you know, the alpha fight there, that was really cool. And that was Liz on Twitter. Her handle is atheistjliz, and I'll include that in the description as well. She's the one who actually sent me that interview because we were talking about it. And so that was really interesting as well. So again, I do genuinely think that he is the successor. And another thing is that he is the successor because he's kind of that bridge between the two, because he doesn't see them as the others. Even though he himself is, you know, has been used and is considered an outsider as well by the government, you know, used and everything like that, he doesn't, at least going into this mission, he doesn't believe there's much of a difference between the two species. So that's why he would be chosen to be their new leader. And moving forward from that, another Twitter user, Alex, his handle is the Black Six Host. And he was discussing with me, you know, it's interesting because Zeus came down from Olympus on, you know, like the Hotel Olympus symbolically, and Vandero, after everything was nuked, he rose from the ashes, essentially the wasteland, which would have been Tartarus or Hades. Hades in general, the underworld, and then Tartarus is the most like toxic part. I didn't know about any of this stuff. I'm not like a Greek mythology buff or anything like that, but yeah, both of them were kind of discussing with me, and huge shout out to both of them for entertaining me with all of these ideas about Vandero. And I just thought his character was so interesting, and I would really, really love, you know, if there is a sequel, like a direct sequel to Army of the Dead, I want to see what Vandero does as the new leader. So that was something I wasn't expecting I was expecting everyone to die and at least a few of them to get bitten, but I never thought there might be a storyline where where one of the characters was chosen specifically. So that was super cool. And those are just like some of the things that I really loved about the movie, and I thought were carefully crafted. Obviously, as I continue to watch it, and I will watch it a few more times, I'm probably going to notice more things. But yeah, it's such an interesting film. Oh, actually, speaking of noticing things, Vandro actually went off on this whole thing about time loops in the middle when Dieter sees all of these skeletons, and he's basically like, are those other people, or is that us from a previous time? And and then you start to see all the skeletons have kind of familiar clothing items that the rest of the team does, and that was another door that was opened. And then I was discussing that, and could the team have done this before? And there was a I guess a montage at the beginning, kind of showing how the mission should go and what their job was supposed to do. It was supposed to be kind of this fun scene, but my fiance pointed out that maybe we were discussing it, that maybe that was their first attempt, or one of the attempts about trying to get into this vault. So that opens a really cool door. Are they stuck in this infinite time loop? Have they tried this before? Is this the first time they've ever actually been successful? Or is this, they're not technically successful, but is this the last attempt because all the other times they've just died? But this time, finally, Vandero is actually chosen and changed. So again, the amount of doors, zombies, robots, time loops. I feel like Zack wrote all of these things that the audience could find interest in, because if there's a potential sequel, then there's multiple routes that could be taken. And that was very, very cool. I'm sure I'll notice more stuff later, again, with another rewatch. Just like with Sucker Punch, I continue to watch it, and I feel like I see something new. I felt like I saw something new with every new watch. At this point now, I've rewatched it quite a few times, so I think I've got I think I've got everything you can get out of Sucker Punch, but I definitely haven't gotten everything that you can get out of Army of the Dead. Again, I've only seen it twice, so there's definitely multiple rewatches that are going to happen. So now that I've kind of talked about all of that and the things that I love, these are the things that I disliked or that I feel like could have been improved. I mentioned before that this is an ensemble piece. There wasn't enough focus on a lot of the characters that I thought were super cool. I want to know more about the characters. I want to know more about Chambers and Guzman, other than he's on YouTube. I understand the limitations, and I do think Zack actually did a pretty decent job. But still, there were again, Scott for me was one of the least interesting characters, and there was so much focus on him because he was the main lead. But I found myself just I don't really care about that, which is, it's fine. I'm sure a lot of people found his story very compelling. It was just for me personally, and I just wish there was a bit more focus on the other characters. Also, regarding Scott, I was kind of rolling my eyes that he had the whole, he had to kill his wife thing. I understand that it was to have that whole scene between him and Kate, for Kate being mad at her dad the entire time after that it wasn't about the fact that he killed his wife, it was the fact that he wasn't there. But I was just like, oh, okay, of course he has to kill a loved one, of course he has to kill his wife. And then the death of the zombie queen too, it was basically used for Zeus's man pain. There was a lot of fridging going on here. It's is it considered fridging if they're already dead, but then they're not dead because they're different species? And I do understand the use of it with Zeus and his queen, because they're trying to empathize with the zombies and show that they have emotions and feelings, but there are better ways to do it. And then of course there's the introduction that she was pregnant, and Zack has done this before. She's had Zack has had zombie babies before, in Dawn of the Dead, so I was just like, okay, I guess we're doing this again. I don't think that particularly is it isn't a cool idea or isn't a cool storyline. I just think there's better ways to show it than, having these gruesome birth scenes or having the mothers have to die and everything like that. It's just, again, limitations of the genre. I understand that everyone is dying, so it's not, Zack is just showing women dying, but it's still kind of particular which women are dying and how they die. If there are, in this universe, if zombies can procreate, then just show a zombie child within the horde. Show another set of zombie parents. We don't have to do it that way. Do I know exactly like what I would have changed? I don't know. Like I'm not saying I'm a screenwriter. I'm not saying what, if I could write better than Zack. I'm not saying that. In that sense, it's just more like I feel like there were better ways to portray these ideas than having it be at the expense of certain female characters. Even though, again, everyone dies, but it's still something I'll criticize him for. And, if you love something, you love it with your whole heart, and you also pick it apart, and you can criticize it. And for all of the films I love from Zack, there's always criticisms that I have for them as well. One thing, too, because of the zombie genre, it did have a lot of predictable beats. It isn't something that I necessarily disliked, but it might be considered a weak point of the film. But it's also clear Zack was counting on predictable beats, and he kind of switched it up by changing the context of these predictable beats. Kind of like I was saying, like, Martin's character, like, he's going to betray them, and he's going to get killed in the end. He's the betrayer, and we know that. What was different was just, kind of the setup of everything by the zombie tiger, him actually getting betrayed, or not betrayed, but tricked in the end. All of that. And lastly, I don't really understand why Tanaka was allowed to survive, but I do at the same time. It's like, I understand that he's like the puppet master. It's like, he's the reason like people are going in there. He works with the government. Like you saw him in meetings with people from the military as well, and someone in a suit. I can only assume these are people from the government, and I understand that capitalism continues on, but it would have been nice to see him lose more than just essentially losing his bodyguard and someone not getting into the safe. And clearly there's been multiple attempts, so he's just allowed to keep doing this over and over and over again, or it's a continuous time loop. We do not know. Those are kind of just like the major gripes that I had. And again, because it's a zombie film, like, it does feel very punitive a lot of the times. I know it's not. I know it's meant to show how unfair everything is and how people are mistreated. That's what horror is for. That's what the zombie genre is for. It's the idea that the others or the monsters are not actually monsters. It's humanity itself, and I get that. It's just sometimes really, it's hard for someone like myself who's so specific in kind of analyzing films, and I always talk about it's important what you show on screen. It doesn't matter what your intention is. That still applies with this movie, except there's like weird asterisks to it because of the genre that it's in. But I will not excuse that. I think, a lot of the deaths were really unfortunate for the women in this film. And in any other genre, it would be, the women die and the men survive. I know the men don't survive in this either. And then in the end, you kind of get both. You get Kate surviving, and then you get Vandero surviving. But I'll still be annoyed about it. And I know that Zack is going to continue on in these and do certain genre type films. And if he wants to do more monster films, I highly, highly suggest that he does a vampire one instead of zombie ones, because I think he's going to get bogged down by the zombie movie structure as a whole, because I think he can do more than that.
and he is still attempting to do a lot more. But there still are gonna be some boxes that define something as a zombie movie, and he is going to have to check those boxes, even if though he's trying to break those boxes as much as he can. But yeah, so that was kind of it. That was kind of my whole talk on Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead, at least from what I got from the film for the first two viewings. Will I come back and do another episode? I don't know. I might do some character episodes, but I really just kind of wanted to get the ball rolling on my initial thoughts and things I interpreted from the film. And in the end of it, I really loved it. Like I said, it's either than Man of Steel being the number one Zack Snyder movie in my opinion. It's my second favorite, and it's up there because there was a lot going on, there was a lot being said, and Zack always tries to push the boundaries for everything. And even though it was still a zombie movie, he was trying his best to not just make it a zombie movie. And I just love all the open ends and things that can be explored. Again, as usual, I still have a lot of criticisms for it, and I probably have even more that I could go on about, and I'll find more when I continue to rewatch the movie. But I guess that's sort of wrapping everything up. Let me know what you thought about the movie. If you have watched it, you can either comment on this video or just send me a DM or tweet the account. So it's ADOC podcast. That is the Twitter handle. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this is the first real episode of this podcast, and hopefully I wasn't ranting too much. I tried to have kind of a coherent order of what I'm saying, but I know I can get off into tangents. So hopefully it felt like it flowed really well. And I hope you tune in for more episodes of this podcast. I am going to start branching out into other topics. I do know that one thing that I do really want to talk about, and I said this in kind of the introductory, is that I do want to talk about Warrior Nun. I want to talk about X-Files. I want to talk about his Dark Materials. So many things. I'll probably do an episode on Sucker Punch as well. But once again, I hope you enjoyed. This is the first episode of A Dash of Chaos. And if you like what you hear, make sure you like this video and make sure you do subscribe to the channel. And I will see you all next time. See you? I guess you don't see anyone when they're listening to your podcast, but until next time, I hope you enjoyed this episode.